A team of experts are hired to dig up an old grave to cleanse the body of a curse plaguing the deceased's family. But there's so much more going on than anyone expects. And that includes us. This one goes places. So join us as we're excited to talk about Exhuma. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim.
Hello. Nothing funny to say this week.
That's not like you, Tim. That's not the Tim I know.
Actually, it sounds pretty much like me, yeah.
Yes, today, this is a horror movie podcast, by the way, and today we are looking at another new release from this year, and that is a Korean film called Exhuma. So we'll get into it. We'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get into the spoilers. And of course, I'll just remind you, if you're enjoying the show, do hit the like button on YouTube. It helps us out a bunch if you do that. And of course, you can get an extra episode every month, as well as some other bonuses over at Patreon. But I'll tell you more about that at the end of the show. Exhuma was getting some buzz, and it was on our list to do. So we jumped at the chance. We did it. Yes.
It's just that simple.
Yeah, I didn't really know anything about it other than the title made me think it was about graves because it sounds like exhuming, right? But I don't know if that was literally what it meant. It does kind of mean that in this case.
Well, I thought it was going to be about a skin condition, and then I realized that I was mispronouncing it. So
was that an eczema joke?
It was.
Very good. Very good. Now, the basic premise of this is that our main characters, who are kind of come in two pairs. Two are sort of paranormal shaman investigators, and then the other two, one's a geomancer, and the other is a funeral director, and they basically sometimes team up when there's spiritual things to take care of that involve graves, because sometimes when there's like a haunting in the family or something, it'll be tied to a grave and a dead body, and they'll take care of it. And a rich person from a Korean family who lives in Los Angeles hires them to take care of something that they believe is haunting their newborn baby. And I feel like any other movie, when I just give that premise, most people would assume that the family with the baby would be the main characters. They are not. The four characters who are investigating are absolutely the main characters as the movie goes on. But I don't want to say anything else because I feel like it spoils things. I'll just say that it goes to more places over the course of the movie, right? It sort of becomes about something else. And I don't want to spoil what any of that is, but it doesn't just stay as simple as I said. It is a longer movie. It's 2 hours and 14 minutes, which for a horror movie is, is on the very meaty side of things. But we'll see how we felt about that in the context of this movie in a bit. But Tim,
yeah,
what did you think of Exhuma?
Man, it feels like it's just been so long since I've gotten to say this on the show, but I really like this movie.
It rocked, him. It goddamn rocked.
What was the last time we actually had a movie that I mean, I feel like there's been so many movies I've been the best we've gotten the last couple of years has been yeah, it was okay.
Yeah, no, I mean 2022 was full of bangers, but I think 2023 and so far in 2024, there's been a couple of alright ones. There's been a couple that have been Late Night with the Devil. It's a solid 7. It was good. Yeah.
But Infested was good.
Yeah, but it didn't blow us away. Yeah. And what's funny is, as I was watching this, I'm like, okay, this is pretty solidly directed early on, and I'm going, it's going through its motions, and I'm like, but I can kind of, I had a vibe of okay, I can kind of feel where this is going with some sort of story, a bit of spirit or something. And I'm like, I was like, that's fine. But there's a moment about an hour 15 into this movie, around the halfway point, I guess, where it just gets kind of awesome in a way that I never saw coming, and went, wait, that's what this movie is? Okay, I'm in now.
I mean, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but it literally could be two different movies.
Almost. If anything, the first half's pretty solidly done, and it's very slow paced, and it's building to what the horror element is. I mean, it's clear that it does feel like it's a horror movie, but there's not actual horror stuff for a while.
Right.
But the second half is where it kind of sings and gets very interesting. It's not flawless, but when it's pulling its idea off, It's doing something that I feel like I've not seen done as well for this particular type of thing before, and that's what's special.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like the word for me is just compelling. Like I was just very drawn into, these characters and this world, and I love like I like learning about different like cultures and rituals, and like so I loved all like kind of the shaman stuff, and just the the throwing in like little bits of like lore, and even like I just love like they would have just kind of like throwaway lines like they'd be like, ooh, foxes at a gravesite, like that's like a bad omen and stuff, and like I don't know, that stuff just kind of like interests me. I'm like, ooh, okay, like I never heard that before.
Honestly, if I ever critique is that there's so much stuff that's uttered so quickly, and the subtitles were going fast sometimes. Is there's actually a couple of things that I'm a bit fuzzy on, and I feel like maybe rewatches will help with it. But that where at one point I was literally questioning how many. I don't want to spoil it, but I was like thinking how many items are we talking about here, and I was a little confused as to how many things were going on, and it was actually less than I thought it was at one point, but it was just because I didn't realize two things were the same thing, and I think it was just because there was so much lore and like mythology being thrown at me, but it was always interesting, and it was always, like you say, compelling, and the visuals they pull off, and they're two big sort of money making scenes which are in the middle and then towards the end. I think that stuff looked fantastic. It felt like it was punching above its weight in terms of budget with those moments, and I'm enthusiastic, Tim. I'm enthusiastic.
Nice. Well, I'm really glad you liked it. Because I was just so this was on Shudder, and I feel like I love Shudder, but I feel like it lets me down more than it lifts me up. I guess, like, don't get me wrong, like, again, there has been
Shudder's good deep down. I know it loves me, right? It hurts me so often, but I know Shudder's got good in it. It'll keep me right eventually.
Right. I mean, the problem is that they're very enthusiastic about like everything they put on there, which is great. I mean, obviously, you're not going to have a streaming service just be like, hey, we put up this crappy thing, check it out if you want. Like, I get that they have to sell it or whatever, but I feel like so many times there's just like, these things they put on there. It's like, oh, they're like, one of the best reviewed horror movies, your next cult favorite, like, get ready to be obsessed with this thing. And then you watch it and it's just like, oh, this sucks. Like, but I mean, every now and again, like, they hit it out of the park. And I think weirdly, sometimes like the better movies are the ones that I don't really see them like advertising and emailing and stuff about. Like I saw them like have a post like, hey, Exhuma's on here now, but I mean, if I was them, I'd be trying to sell the shit out of this movie because this is what I'd want people to come to the service for and check out. But yeah, I don't know, I was just so happy with this. I really liked the atmosphere of this movie. It's it's not very flashy, like you kind of said, like the first half it's a little more slower and quiet, but I really like that stuff. Like just them like walking through the woods, it did such a good job of like making me like, I'm here in California, it's been so hot lately, and it's just been kind of miserable, but then like I just loved like seeing them walking through those woods, and even though it's a completely different country, like kind of reminded me of like some of the woods in New England, like during the fall, like all the leaves and stuff on the ground. Like I just thought there was some really like beautiful shots there, and I don't know, it just really drew me in, and it's a good job, man.
And for the record, just in case anyone misinterpreted this from what I said before, the Korean family who hires them is living in the US now. But most of the movie does take place in Korea because the body that they suspect has something attached to it. The grave site's in Korea. So most of the movie is in Korea. There's a quick visit to the US at the start. Because I didn't realize they went back to Korea at first. It wasn't until... I realized they went back to talk to someone else, but I didn't realize that they were staying in Korea until they passed the road sign on the way to it. And I went, oh, I think we're still in Korea. Like the body was here before the family moved. I get it. Okay.
And it's kind of interesting. It's like that. Yeah, they do like some different locations and like different languages and stuff in the movie. During the parts in America, they have the characters like speaking English, and then it's kind of funny because obviously it's a foreign movie, and so we're watching with subtitles and stuff. And at one point, my wife walked in at some point through the movie, and she was like, Sorry,
it was like you were struggling to remember who you're. There's like, who's that woman again? My wife.
Oh, no.
that one.
Well, I mean, I just want to make sure I'm not spoiling anything, but I don't think it's like a spoiler or anything. But
Yeah.
Like my wife walked in and she was like, "Oh, like why is that why is that person speaking Japanese?" And I was like, "Oh, it's a Korean movie." And they're like, "No, they're speaking Japanese." And then I realized like,
yeah, to be fair, there are parts where it makes sense they might be speaking Japanese. Yeah. Although, to be honest, I will say the subtitles never indicated that they were in a different language, so I never noticed they switched to Japanese.
Yeah, so like I totally missed on that, but then like there's a reason for it later, and so I was like, I realized like, oh, okay, oh, that's really interesting that, that was going on.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. It's not even got that many locations in the movie, but it does sort of make use of them quite well.
Oh yeah.
It's so hard to talk about why the movie is good because you can't actually. Right. I feel like it would just be spoiling it to actually say what it does that's interesting. Like the opening stuff is solid and is done well, but it definitely elevates quite a bit once it gets to kind of the meat of the story. I mean, maybe the broad critiques could maybe be, okay, it is a bit long, right? And maybe there is almost a thing where it does kind of feel like it's in two halves, where the movie almost feels like it has kind of an ending about halfway through, and then it starts again. And that does feel like that initial switch to that new section feels like, whoa, I feel like we're just starting a new movie now. And it almost like the pacing there takes this massive hit as a result. Obviously, by the time you get to the end of that chapter, and when I say chapter, the movie is literally split into chapters where it comes up saying chapter 1, chapter 2. I think that's chapter 5, I want to say, is when it, or maybe 4 or 5, something in that range. By the time it gets to the end of that next chapter, it's like, oh shit, this is even better than the first half. But there is that kind of like, wait, we're starting from scratch again almost. And it's not really from scratch. It's very related to what happened in the first half. But from a, from like a crescendo point of view where you're building up to a climax, the story it was telling for the most part is over like an hour in. And then it goes on to something kind of related, but still pretty new, all things considered. So.
Yeah. And then, luckily though, like that kind of second half, I feel like it moves so quickly because it's like really like ramps up everything. So even though it is, kind of a longer movie, I didn't really feel the length as much.
Honestly, the only problem I had is that because I didn't realize it was over 2 hours, I just went in thinking it was 2 hours. I was kind of like crunching, like, oh shit, I'm meant to record this in like X amount of minutes, and I'm against the clock here. Come on.
Yeah, I watched it last night, and then I was having a little trouble keeping my eyes open at the end, but it's just because I'm exhausted all the time, and I started a little later than I normally would have if it was like a longer movie or something. But not the movie's fault at all. I was just tired that night.
Yes, you're a father. You're allowed to use that card, at least for a few years. Once they're a certain age, you can't pretend that you're tired because you're a father anymore.
Oh yeah.
Like once they can, I don't know, bathe themselves, that's it. You're not allowed to use that excuse anymore.
Once I can just throw a PS5 controller in their hands and call it a day. Just walk out of the room.
Probably be a PS6 by then, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Time's moving fast. Oh, maybe not. No, maybe you'll have the PS6 for yourself, and you'll be like, "Here, brats. Here's the hand-me-down. You can have the 5. I'll be on the 6 over here."
Oh yeah, go play Astro Boy when I'm playing whatever.
Did you say Astro Boy?
Astro Boy, Astro Bot, whatever. I'm sure there's an Astro Boy game too.
Possibly. That sounds like a real thing that exists.
Well, Astro Boy is like a famous manga cart.
Okay, that's why it sounds like a real thing. Okay, because it is a real thing. All right, fair enough. I mean, obviously, sometimes I'll go through the cast with these movies. I suspect we don't know most of this cast just because it happens to be a foreign film. However, there is one notable face in here. Choi Min-sik in here is one of the 4 main characters, Mr. Kim. I instantly recognized him, although I'm like, man, he's looking old. And that's because he's Old Boy. Right? And I'm not making a joke because Old Boy's got the word old in it. I'm saying that I realized, Old Boy was 21 years ago, so of course he looks like he's in his 60s now, because he was like 40 or whatever when he made that movie. So, Old Boy's in this.
I didn't pick up on that until you told me a little bit ago, before we started recording, and then once you told me that, I was like, oh wow, yeah, I couldn't believe it. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's so funny because like there's some actors who pop up in these movies like him, and he's in obviously Old Boy, like I said, but he's also in I Saw the Devil. I've definitely seen him pop up in some other things. He was in Lucy, which is obviously not a Korean movie, but he popped up in that because that had scenes set all over the place.
Lucy, wow.
Yeah, I know. So you know,
I wonder, like, is that anyone's favorite movie?
That's a bit sad if it is, because it's not very good.
It's like such a like. I'm not saying that's bad. It's just sometimes I think it's interesting when there's just these like random one-off movies that. Sometimes I just wonder, like, does anyone ever like think about those movies?
I'm sure someone does. I mean, it's a thing. Yeah, I feel like it's him, and then the other actor who I just looked up his name because I wouldn't have been able to remember it, is Song Kang-ho. I feel like those two guys just are the two people I expect to see in a lot of Korean movies because they always pop up. He's from Parasite and The Host and Memories of Murder.
Yeah.
He's popped up in a bunch of stuff. You'll know his face. He's in JSA as well, Joint Security Area. But,
he's basically in all of is it Bong Joon-ho's movies?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So, like, it's just those two guys for whatever reason. They're the two mainstays of Korean cinema. Because it's not like these other actors. I clicked on the other like three main leads, and they've got like dozens and dozens of credits. They've got a bunch of Korean TV shows and movies that I've just never heard of. Like, they're working actors, but for whatever reason, those two actors seem to be in a lot of the stuff that gets the international like acclaim. It's like, hey, this is a big deal everywhere. So,
well, with that being said, though, like, I thought everyone in the cast really did a great job. Like, they were all, all good performances, all like pretty interesting, varied characters. You know, I enjoyed everyone.
Yeah, they're all solid performances. I like how it handled. Arguably, it's more generic sort of spooky stuff, which I won't spoil any of this, but like I'm talking about the first half of the movie when we see kind of like vague things and reflections and stuff like that. I thought the way they handled it had a nice bit of mystique to it, as opposed to just you know, the big whole let's just have a lot of CG swirls and whatever else Hollywood might do.
I would say it was like, you know, I mean, you know, we've talked about before, like, obviously at this point we've, you know, I mean, on the show we've literally done hundreds of movies, but I mean, in our own personal lives we probably watch like, you know, thousands of horror movies at this point. So, you know, we're pretty desensitized, like stuff doesn't really scare us anymore, but I could see this movie, you know, like I thought it was like pretty effectively creepy, and, you know, it wouldn't really scare like, you know, people like us, but I could see it like scaring some people.
For a noob, yeah. If you get like a 14-year-old who's never watched like a foreign horror movie and you slap this in front of them, this might be their, you know, ring you or something where it's like, oh shit, this is hitting some notes. But yeah, like you said, we were a bit desensitized to it, but you know, it was fun though. It was effective for the most part, and then when it gets to its like more unique stuff in the second half, it's like, okay, this is just really fun and different and a lot more exciting visually in a way that doesn't feel hokey. I was super into it, so nice. Yeah, all good stuff. All right, I'm just trying to think. Was there anything else I want to talk about before we get to spoilers? Because I don't know if there's a ton we can talk about.
I feel like we don't really talk about the score enough on the show, but I don't know. I also never really have too much to say about it. I liked it in the movie. Like, again, I feel like a lot of the time it's kind of understated. You know, it feels like more of a quiet movie.
There's a couple of notable points where it stuck out, and you know, I do like talking about score when it's a bit more of a noticeable part of the movie. And I think here, this movie actually kind of has a jump scare for the title at the start. Like there's a couple of studio logos and it's very quiet, and then it just goes boom when the title comes up, and it kind of has a bit of a jump scare. But I did notice, you know, like even the end credits song had like a I don't even know what you'd call it, but like a kind of like an Asian chanting kind of, well, not chanting, but like a sort of, you know, you can probably hear it when I describe it, which is like, you know, it's like an Asian woman's kind of singing sort of a high pitched kind of thing as you're hearing sort of stringed instruments and stuff. Like, it had a very sort of local sound to it, I guess. But it stuck out though as having a good kind of vibe. I also thought the music just before the end of the movie stood out to me as being very different from the rest of the movie, and I won't spoil why, but it did feel like it had a very different mood.
I wonder like what the most like inappropriate to like the rest of the movie, like ending credits song would be.
Oh, that's good. I was going to say the end of Schindler's List have like a Nazis Must Die song or something, but that would still at least fit spiritually, even if it sounded weird to hear like a punk song at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the Pet Cemetery end song, even though it is like this kind of like rock and roll like punk song, which like I guess kind of fits the movie, but like the movie it's like such like a bleak downer ending, and then it just kind of goes into the song. It's like a little strange. It's not.
It's the best part of the movie.
I don't know why this has been in my mind lately, but for some reason I've been thinking about it's not a movie, but the ending song to Castlevania Symphony of the Night. It's so strange. It's like this very like jazzy, like kind of like almost like Kenny G or something. Like it's like this saxophone like playing song. It feels like very like elevator music, and like this woman singing like this very, I don't know, this kind of like melancholy song. I think it's called Like the Wind or something like that. It's very strange. I believe it's the same woman that sings the Metal Gear Solid 3 theme song, Snake Eater, as well. So there you go.
I mean, well, not all, but some of the early Resident Evils had very upbeat ending music.
Oh yeah.
Which were very different from the rest of their soundtracks. But I think in that case, it's meant to be like a happy you made it, you survived. Here's some happy music to.
That makes sense. Yeah.
To chill out to. I don't know if they always kept that up. I think they've changed it over time. But yeah, the earlier games had that. But yes, what an interesting question. I'm sure there's some really inappropriate ones.
Yeah, I mean, hit us up in the comments if you can think of one.
Like imagine Sixth Sense ended and you just hear Linkin Park come on, like. Like it's the end of Transformers.
Yeah.
Bruce Willis fades away. What I've done. All right, spoilers then. We do spoilers for Exhuma.
Spoil it.
Let's spoil it. All right. Instead of going through strictly in order here, I feel like just trying to discuss what's actually going on in the movie as a baseline might be a good idea. Mm-hmm. And then just picking sort of like moments and stuff we want to discuss, because well, I mean, I suppose we could describe the first half kind of separately, right? Because the first half is like, okay, we are introduced to the two of our younger four characters, right? We have Haru. Actually, I think it may be a silent H. I don't know. It's always tough because I recognize it in the subtitles every time they said it, but I'm like, I have no idea how you're pronouncing this. I'll say Warum, who's the young woman, and then Bongil is the young guy, right? And they're paranormal investigators, and they're both shaman as well, is maybe a better term, but they're flying to LA to meet with a family whose baby has not stopped crying since being born, like an obscene amount of time crying. And they think it's some sort of curse, partly because this has happened before. Although they don't, I mean, the fact that the investigators don't know that yet. They inspect the baby for a bit, and then Warum turns around and says, this has happened with other members of the family, right? And like the people and the family are kind of skeptical, right? They clearly didn't really take this very seriously and think this was going to lead to anything, but they both looked like horrified, like, how did she know that? She's right. Oh no. Which leads to the husband of the family, who's the one who hired them, and they explained to him that this could be I can't remember what they called it, but there's like a grave related thing where there's a family member buried somewhere whose soul is effectively torturing all the new family members, because all the firstborns that have been born in America in this family have all suffered. Because the husband here, the one with the money, he's the younger of two boys, and his older brother had these issues and eventually died from it. So like that's the setup, right? And like, there's a whole bunch of stuff. So we get that. We also get an introduction for our two characters back in Korea, South Korea, obviously. This is Mr. Kim, who is a geomancer, which is basically just he reads the ground and like talks about feng shui and talks about how this is a good place for a gravesite because it faces this and it faces that or whatever.
This is like the most badass I've ever seen, like a feng shui expert. like usually I just thought, oh, like that's the thing where you try to, move your furniture around or whatever, but like No, this guy's like, going to graves and like digging things up and stuff.
He even tastes the dirt to like test it. Because notably in this scene when he's doing it, because we get like an example of them digging up someone for a family for some reason, and he tastes the dirt. Notably, he doesn't spit it out, but later on when they go to the main grave site that the movie's revolving around, he does spit it out, and it's like, wait, so that other dirt was good? That tasted nice because the ground was hollow and nice.
He got like a couple extra scoops. He's like, let's bring this home.
This was pure dirt.
One thing I really appreciated in the movie, which maybe this is just like, a cultural difference, but I feel like in so many American movies, you would have to go through this whole like, beat of skepticism, and there would be like, at least like, one family member that like usually it'd probably be like the dad or something that's like, I can't believe we're paying this quack like to like, nothing's wrong, like come on, and then they have to kind of get through that. And so I like that the movie just like right away is like everyone is like pretty much on, like you said, there's like a little bit of skepticism, but pretty quickly on everyone's on board and willing to like listen to these people and trust them and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the family with the baby are kind of desperate. It feels like I think in this world there are skeptical people, but the people we meet with these two characters are a family who've already hired them, so they're already clearly on board and have wanted to make this choice. And there's a whole thing here where like the kid in the family stole the gold teeth from not for malicious money reasons, just because something to hold on to from his dead grandmother, but that's what's been causing the spirit unrest or something, so they do a whole thing and they put the so this is basically just their, like any other movie where you get introduced your two cops and it's like, here's them doing like a simple case and showing how good they are at it. That's what this scene is for these two. It's like, hey, they solved this, it's done, we're back at the home base office eating our fancy fish bones or whatever it was they were grilling. I don't know.
I like that they're saying, I liked it was like they kept saying like the ghost was hungry. She's like, yeah, I need to eat or something like that. I was like, because the kid took her teeth.
Yeah, I actually got hungry during the movie and went and had some chicken dippers, which I didn't intentionally do, but it was after the line where the little girl's saying, hey, we're really going to sacrifice that chicken, and she's like, what are you complaining about, you like fried chicken? And then I went and made some chicken and had some chicken.
Like, oh, that's not a bad idea. I've been trying to do a little bit of a diet, so I've been counting calories and trying to be a little strict with myself, but I'd done pretty good, and I had a healthy number of calories left over in the day, so I treated myself to a few Oreos while I was watching.
Very good, Tim. Very good.
Well, sorry, I didn't have any chicken dippers handy.
We're introduced these characters, and then the other two characters, Bongil and Warum, come in and sort of clearly they all know each other, clearly worked before in certain jobs. It's like, and they explain the gig, mostly off camera, but it kind of like it shows they've explained it. And they meet with the rich guy who's now flown over to Korea to carry out this, even though the rest of his family don't seem to want it, particularly his aunties don't want it. And there's an auntie who lives by in Korea as well who's going to show up in a little bit. And it's this idea that all of the direct children of the grandfather who's buried, because that's what they think it is. They think it's the grandfather of this guy. But all of his aunties who are the direct kids of that grandfather are a bit more like, oh, really? Do we want to do this? But what's strange is that when they drive out to the gravesite, it's halfway up a mountain. Like they're going on all these back roads and they get to this spot and the gravestone's unmarked. There's nothing, well, there's like a set of numbers in the back, but there's no name, nothing like that. And it's like, that's really strange. They see the foxes on the way up, of course, and all these other little things. And it's like, oh, there's a bit, this is definitely building. It feels like we're like something bad's going to happen once we've maybe done this. And in fact, to sell the idea that there's danger here, Mr. Kim, he tastes the dirt and he does a few other little checks and he's listening to the grave and he's checking out the auras and whatnot. And he's like, I'm sorry, but we can't do this job. And leaves, right? And we have a whole thing where he's like, no, we're not doing this. And they're back at the hotel. And effectively, because the husband here, the guy who wants this done, starts asking Mr. Kim about his personal life and saying, hey, have you got kids? And we already found this out in another conversation, actually, but he's like, yeah, I've got a daughter who's about to get married. And in fact, one of the reasons why they're happy to get this job is because he needs money to pay for his daughter's wedding, and this pays very well. And he's like, yeah, well, my son's like cursed. Can you save my son, please? And kind of like appeals to him. And it's actually Warren who says, technically, in theory, we could do this ritual that'll like cleanse the thing as we move it. And it's like, well, we've never combined these two things. We've never, taken up a body to cleanse it and also done this ritual to try and de-evil it or whatever. Again, there was a lot of terms been thrown around here. I don't remember them all, but this was the gist of it. But he kind of reluctantly seems to agree because he wants to help out this family, in particular the baby that's in trouble. He's been appealed to as a father, and he's like, if this was my daughter, I'd do it. So that kind of sets that up.
Yeah, and it's not like it's not like this hasn't ever been done before, but I love like when there's just like a place where something is just wrong with it. Like a lot of times it'll be like a house or something, but like here I just like traveling all this way to this spot, and then you can just see like the fear and panic and Kim's like reactions, and just how like he really sells it, makes you believe like, oh, there's something wrong about this place, and it just feels so ominous, like with all the animals looking around and just like this weird just very like random nonchalant grave just sticking out of nowhere. I thought they just did like a really good job of just selling it and making it feel like mysterious and also like ominous at the same time. So it does a good job of just really like sucking you in, and I don't know, just making you like interested to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, and the ritual, by the way, is very elaborate. It involves 4 dead pigs, and they've got like 4 grave diggers. Warren does like a sort of dance, and she's like picking up the blood. She's stabbing the dead pigs, and there's like it's a whole thing. And then the other guy, Bongel, he's like hitting drums and like doing chants and stuff. It's like a whole process. There's a whole lot going on to it.
I really love this stuff. Like I found it fascinating. Like obviously, like I don't really know like exactly what they're going on. I thought that they said something like were they trying to like trick the spirit or something, like trying to get it to go into the pig or something like so that stuff I also found like really interesting, and I actually like honestly like I wanted to learn more. I'm like kind of like, oh, like maybe I should like look up these rituals or something afterwards, because they seem pretty interesting.
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm particularly drawn to this part of it, just because, unlike later on in the movie when we've established a lot of things, and it's like, hey, this is what we're going to have to try and do to just win and survive. So here's the things we can do, and this is how the ritual's going to work. Whereas here, they don't explain it too much. It's mostly kind of, maybe kind of flashy and like, hey, isn't this look all a bit crazy and stuff? So it's less interesting to me than stuff that comes later. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's done well enough here. So we'll basically just focus on what happens with this dead body and all the things that result from that. But I will just mention before we move on to that one of the grave diggers, when they're sort of cleaning up the gravesite after they've moved the coffin out, he sees like a snake and he freaks out, and it's like, oh yeah, of course you freak out, right? And then he sees the head of the snake, and it's like a woman's head on a snake. Now, not a full-size woman's head, like one that's proportional to the snake,
right.
But still, it's screaming, and he sort of stabs it with his shovel to kill it, because, well, I don't blame him. I'd want to kill that too. I'd be like, what the hell is this thing?
So I mean, I was already vibing with the movie at this point, but like this really made me stand up and be like, oh, okay, like so there might be like I mean, I already thought the movie was like interesting, but I'm like, oh, okay, this might be even more like maybe weirder, interesting than I had kind of anticipated.
You still didn't really have a good idea, to be honest, given where the rest of the movie
I still
goes.
have no idea what's gonna happen, but it does make you stand up and go like, I actually had to rewind it because like it took me a second to be like, wait, what was that?
Yeah, it was. What's going on? But so the rest of the first half of the movie, right up until the end of chapter 4, I think it is it's about taking this body in the coffin. They've not opened the coffin. In fact, the grandson's thing was that, hey, the rules for this is that, okay, you can cremate it, but cremate it right away and don't open the coffin, right? Let's be respectful, blah blah. And these guys aren't hucksters. They're not trying, like, as much as you hear them complain a little bit about some of the rich assholes that they sell plots to, because he's just basically buttering them up and like giving them nice spots and whatnot. And he also And this is actually kind of interesting for later, actually, is they also have a conversation where the other guy, what's his name, Cole, the funeral director, his partner, he's like, hey, like, those sites you're selling to people, like, there's so many dead people over the course of, you know, the last several thousand years, like, how many good spots is there left? Like, that spot we were at today, this is the first one that we're at the start of the movie, he's like, yeah, well, you know, was that even that good? And he's like, yeah, that was about 70% good. And he's like, 70%? It's like, yeah, that's the best you can do now. All the best spots, all the 100%, 90%ers, they're all gone. Like, they've been gone for decades or centuries at this point.
Which is like, thanks, movie, for unlocking a fear that, like, I never knew I had. Like, oh, great, now I have to worry about, like, how many good places there are for dead people.
Well, that's definitely maybe I don't know if this is a real thing in Korea or it's just a thing for the movie, or maybe it's just certain belief systems in Korea. It may not be everyone, but certain people will. But this idea that you pick like what seemingly because these spots aren't at cemeteries, they're up on a hill somewhere. I mean, they're in the middle of nowhere, so no one's really going to care. But that's not something most people do with their dead. They they go to a graveyard. So
I have to, when I die, I'll have to send you a little bit of my body so you can still do the show. You can just have me like in the corner or something.
I do like the assumption that I'm going to outlive you. I like that part of that story.
Oh yeah, no, I don't have any delusions that I'll be around much longer.
Yeah, there's actually kind of a little bit of a... I'm hesitant to say climate change message, but there's a little bit of we have to like protect the land for future generations, and that definitely came across a little bit. You know, you could read this as them talking about, you know, because they specifically say it's, you know, it's land for our next generation, my daughter, the generation after that, so on.
That's interesting. I didn't really think about it, but I can see that, and then you could even kind of relate like the idea of, you know, the grandfather, the older generation trying to, you know, like still hold on, and, you know, basically.
Or even just the idea that all this is happening because these older generations did a lot of bad things that is now, you know, causing all these troubles in present day. Like, there was definitely a little bit of that.
That's interesting.
There, yeah. So, but it starts raining, right? And apparently it's bad juju to do a cremation in the rain. And of course, the grandson...
They can't find a... So what's kind of interesting is they're saying like, yeah, it's bad luck to cremate someone in the rain because they won't be able to find their way to a good afterlife. And again, like, I don't really know how these things work, but like what I was thinking it was like, well, he's already been like buried in the ground for a while. Like, has he not found his way to the afterlife yet? Like, well,
no, I think clearly not, because that's what they said right at the start, is that there's a spirit in a grave causing all this torment.
But when someone is in a grave though, do they never automatically go to the afterlife? Do they have to be cremated, or?
I don't think they have to be. No, I don't think they have to be cremated. But I think the idea is that if a spirit's still around causing trouble, then it's still there in some capacity. Whereas, whereas if there's no unfinished business, they'll just go on, kind of thing. I did like the grandson's response to this though. He's like, but we're not doing it outside. What does it matter? And he's like, no, it's bad. They can't go to the afterlife. We have to do it properly. Yeah. All the things. So it's like, hey, we know the local hospital, like the morgue. We know the people there. We can save the body there overnight and do it tomorrow or whatever.
There's no weirdos that are gonna try to open it up or anything, so we're good.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're contacted at the hospital. He literally lures Ko out of the morgue by saying, "Hey, there's a great soup kitchen across the street. Go and get yourself some dinner." And he's like, "Why does everyone care about my dinner?"
Yeah,
and he goes
actually thought that was kind of funny that he calls him out. He's like, "Yeah, why does everyone keep asking me?"
Yeah, because I think Kim says that to him as well a little bit earlier, where he's like, "Hey, make sure you go and get something to eat. There's hot soup across the street." But it's all a ploy because he wants to dig into this clearly expensive coffin, hoping that he's going to find some treasure or when I say treasure, I mean like rings, jewelry, valuables, that kind.
And maybe he had expensive bones.
Or hey, who knows? I mean, if he's like a soldier, maybe they buried him like a big gold sword or something. He's like, hey, this is just solid gold. Anyway, of course, when he does this, though, our other characters, Bongil and Harum, come in the door just as he like pries it open, and there's like a POV shot of like whatever comes out of it goes past her and kind of knocks her down to the ground, and she's like, something just flew past me, something's out. And it's basically this spirit, right, of the grandfather starts hunting down all the family members of his, right? Hunts after his daughter, it would be, because it's the auntie of the grandson. Goes after the daughter that's in LA, and also the brother who's in the wheelchair in LA. We didn't even mention him, but there was like an old brother character who was being taken care of by the sister, who just kind of sat at the window. This is where you get a really great moment of how they're going to show this ghost, if you want to call him that, where you just get this sort of vague image and the reflection of like the shadowy figure kind of thing. You don't get any clear shots of him, and it's all kind of presented. It's presented in a really cool and inventive way, I thought.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I thought it was like pretty effective and creepy. I think especially this kind of first instance where you have, I think it was just his son, the old man, and you could kind of just hear, the grandfather's like, voice coming out from the window and like telling him to open it up, and that was pretty effective. Yeah,
and then the sister character of the old man is downstairs watching a dance competition TV show and just sort of dancing alongside. And then in the reflection, it's like the ghost is dancing with her. But again, it's never hokey looking. They do it in a particular way where it comes off a little intimidating. And she dies as well.
Yeah, you can kind of like vision the what like the crappy, like American version of this would be. That would probably have like some close-up CGI, ghost with its mouth open or something, and then it would like cut to the next scene or something. But yeah, they managed to do it in a pretty cool way.
Yeah, and then at this point they're kind of realizing that something's happening, and Mr. Kim's trying to contact the grandson, the rich guy who's at the hotel, and saying, "Hey, there's something going on. The spirit's out. The coffin's been open." But he's trying to get through.
This was such a great scene.
Yeah, he's trying to get through to him, and he can't get to him, right? And then you hear Mr. Kim banging on his door saying, "Hey, let me in. This is important. Something's going on." And he's like, "Oh, shit." And I think what I liked about this is that I feel like most horror movies would have it be the opposite, where the voice on the phone would be the real one, and the person at the door would be the evil spirit trying to get in, and he'd open the door and then the spirit would get him. But this was the opposite. The real guy was the one banging on the door, and the spirit was the one on the phone, like messing with him.
Yeah, and I think I even went back and forth like during the scene with like who I thought like was
the real one. Yeah, who the real Dr. Kim is.
Yeah, which I think just it's just makes it like so I use the word a lot, but like it's so like effective, because at first I was like, oh, like don't open the door, and then I was like, oh, wait a minute, like no, like drop the phone.
Yeah, and this whole thing here is that the spirit gets him, but it kind of possesses him for a bit, and he starts like I actually, Joe, to be honest, there was a little moment in this movie because he did something like a Nazi salute where I thought it was going to go down a very specific path where like the grandfather was secretly like allied with the Japanese during World War II, and that led to Nazis, and like it's not quite that. It doesn't go down that path. In fact, I think, but it was showing that he was a soldier. He was like this dedicated guy. He starts like doing like a military salute and like speech or whatever. He starts yelling stuff before he vomits out like an obscene amount of blood and whatnot. He eventually dies though because he turns his head, not full exorcist, but like more than it should go. It's sort of like an angle overlooking over his shoulder. And I think this is where we find this is the first time we hear the fox will cut the stomach of the tiger.
Severed the tiger's waist, I think.
Was that the line? Yeah.
Something
anyway,
like that.
A fox cut a tiger down the middle, right? That's that was the gist of the sentence. And that's kind of the big thing. And the race against time now to like save someone is the baby. They're like, hey, it's going after the baby next. So we literally get the ghost sort of like hovering over the baby and going to smother it kind of thing. And this is all happening as they're performing a ritual at the morgue to try and bring the spirit back to the body so they can contain it. And they do a whole thing here where again, what's his face? Gil's banging his drums. We've got Warham waving our big handkerchief things around the room. It's a whole big process. And this also establishes that sometimes during the rituals, that Bong-gil gets like lets himself get possessed. Like they almost use him as like a conduit to like trap the ghost for a little bit before they put it into the body again. But yeah, it's a whole thing here. That's this entire segment. But I think what's so it's a fun moment because they do it just in time to save the baby, right? The spirit comes, right? It says a few ominous things in Bong-gil, but then it's like, okay, that's it. They've dealt with this. And they do a whole thing where the camera pulls away at the end of this scene and it fades to black, and it's like, oh, that feels kind of like we're ending.
Yeah.
Right? But we're only like an hour, just over an hour in. It's like, okay, it feels like we've done this part of the movie now. And then, yeah, it goes to chapter 4 or 5, whatever the next one is. I can't remember exactly. And it's like, hey, this is where we start building up, like, what else is going on here? Because, obviously, in the back of our heads, you might be remembering the snake. And, like, what was the snake about? That wasn't even in the coffin. There's something else going on up in that mountain. What's happening?
Oh, no. And actually, sorry, yeah, going back to that real quick, though. Again, I thought they did, like, a really good job, like, building tension where... because they can't burn the body until they get like the okay from the mourners, so they're trying to talk to I think it's the aunt, and
yeah, it's the other of the dead guy's daughters, right? Who's the one that's living in Korea, because she showed up for the exhumation up at the gravesite, and she clearly wasn't happy about it, but it wasn't her say that the grandson had the decision to be made. But now he's dead, so now the only family member they can get in touch with is her, and they're trying to explain, hey, we need an okay from a family member, can we burn the body now? And she finally sort of says, yeah, all right, burn baby burn.
Yeah, but it's just filmed like they just really like racket up the tension, and it's like going back and forth, and like you're seeing, you know, like he's about to touch the baby, and the fever's going up, and then they're on the phone, and then like, yeah, they're trying like, oh, we really need to burn this thing, but we need to get the okay, and again, just all like really well done. You really feel like just the rush, you know, that they're in.
Absolutely. Yeah, as much as I said we weren't going to go through it too much in order, we kind of did for that first half, because I feel like the first half's the more normal half, and we can kind of just go through it, and that builds up, and that's where it is. Because now we get to the stuff where, okay, the gravedigger who killed the snake is sick and is dying, and he says, you know, he passes on what he saw to Mr. Kim, and Mr. Kim goes and checks the gravesite again.
And I just want to say, like, I'm glad that they came back to this, because like it was such like a weird moment but I was kind of like, all right, I guess like that's it. But I like that it was like, oh no, there's actually like a reason for this.
Yeah, because he goes back up and checks it and gets freaked out again, and he ends up going to a little like, it's not a temple, it's a little monastery. Well, it's a couple of buildings, but it's like a monk who's there, right? And it starts asking about all this stuff, because one of the things they learned from the rich guy in the first half is that the person who found the plot, because that was when he first like tested the gravesite, Mr. Kim was like, who picked this gravesite? Like who put him here? Like this is important. And it was a name like Gasuni, I want to say was the name.
That sounds right, yeah.
And but there wasn't really much information about him, and he sees this little like, you know, monk area here, and relatively close, like down the road in the mountain, and he's like, hey, you know, who are you? And this guy introduces himself, and he's like, oh, does this place like belong to Gasuni, or is that something to do with this place? And he's like, no, I've never heard of him. But we do learn some things from this guy, which is that there was a belief a long time ago that someone rich was buried in the mountain, and one of the reasons why the grave was unmarked, at least this is what the family thought, was to avoid grave robbers knowing who it was, so they wouldn't dig him up and try and steal stuff. But apparently there was a bunch of grave robbers in the area, like decades and decades ago, right? This is actually from before the grandfather was buried, but we don't know that yet, because it turns out the grandfather was one of the supposed grave robbers, but they weren't grave robbing, they were trying to find what was on the mountain because they wanted to get rid of it. They were doing something good. I was expecting the grandfather to turn out to be evil, right? And I guess his spirit's kind of evil, but I think I think he was being punished, because they mentioned that Gasuni was a Japanese like general or something, or a great Japanese shaman who wanted to punish him for what they were trying to do with this thing in the mountain, which we're getting to. So that's what the curse was. That's why he's cursed. That's why all the people in his family have been getting sick, and it's why his spirit was doing all these bad things when they opened the coffin. Right? That explains all of that stuff.
Yeah, it's funny though, because like most of the movie I was like kind of wondering like, geez, does this guy just like hate his family? Like, why is like like grandfather like such a dick? And like I like, wow, the family's being like really respectful with the body of like the spirit that's like trying to kill everyone.
Yeah, this is the thing. So at this point, you're thinking, oh, so it's like a witch's curse, right? This guy, this grandfather character, pissed off someone back in the day on this mountain, and they did this to him, a Japanese person, right? And you're like, okay, that still sounds like a fairly typical thing, right? I don't know where we're going. We've still got an hour of a movie left, but like, yeah, okay, fair enough, right? Sounds pretty simple and straightforward. But what we find out is that underneath the coffin,
this is so cool,
and the grave in the mountain, there's a second coffin, right? An old boy, or Mr. Kim, I should say, finds the second coffin. But not only is there a second coffin, it's vertically planted in the ground. So when he digs it up, he gets like the top of the coffin. He gets like the little, the tip of the head, and then like they have to dig deeper and deeper to eventually get the whole thing unearthed. And it's like, okay, we've got a second coffin that was underneath the grandfather's coffin.
This is such a cool idea. Like I really didn't have any idea where the movie was going, and
yes,
like you said, you're kind of like, I know this is a longer movie. There's still like got to be more to here, but what could we happen? And then, I don't know. Like I mean, it doesn't sound like it's like the craziest idea in the world, but I don't think I've ever seen like something like this in a horror movie. Like it's a simple idea, but it's so, I don't know, just find it very cool and effective to be like, oh, like there's a grave, or there's a coffin under this coffin, and then just the idea that it's like vertically, it's like, well, that's weird, like what's going on here?
It's just strange enough that it does feel really unique. I mean, I guess the way you described this movie in a way, without getting to what it actually is, it would be to say that it's kind of like you watch a movie with an angry spirit, right? So it's just a sort of simple ghost movie to an extent, but that's only half the movie. The second half of the movie is about the thing that made him a ghost, or that made him a vengeful spirit. And that thing's actually much scarier and way more interesting than the first thing was. Not the first thing was bad, but the second thing's more interesting, and that's what this is getting to. So they get in everyone, right? So that all four of the characters are involved in digging up the coffin at this point. Yeah,
and just to interject for a second too, like this movie does such a good job of introducing like it's like the movie like, is like one big mystery, but like there's like stuff will pop up, and that and then later you'll find out like why or what the significance of it is. And this movie just does such a good job of that versus like how many like crappy generic like Hollywood movies have we watched where they're just so focused on the why and having the people research and get answers and stuff, and it's always like such a for most of the time, like in those generic movies, it tends to be kind of the more boring frustrating part of it, because it always feels so like cliche, and like it's just like the movie is too obsessed with providing answers and stuff. But this just does such a good job of like giving you information and making you interested in it and wanting to know what's going on.
Well, I think part of it here, and I think this is actually before they dig it up, there's a debate between Kim and Ko, where Ko's like, why are we going to disturb it? Why don't we just leave it up there? And or maybe it's after. On some of it, this is blurring into different orders, but they have this debate, and Kim this is where he makes his big speech about, this is for future generations, that something has made that ground effectively evil. Well, there's like an evil part, and the whole, it basically gets to the point where he compares what that statement meant about the cutting the tiger in half. So the fox is tied to the Japanese like god or shaman or demon or whatever is in there, right? But the idea being that the tiger represents Korea, because to some people or in folklore or whatever, Korea is like a tiger latched on to the rest of the continent, as if it's biting like the rest of the continent. And the idea that the middle is like, I mean, I suppose you could argue that's where North and South Korea meet, is the waste of Korea. But the idea that this was like the Japanese at the time were trying to like tear it apart, like they were trying to cut through Korea, and this is effectively causing this corruption and evil and whatever over time. But what I'm getting at here with this debate, though, is more this idea that this scene is more interested in telling us why the character wants to do something about it, even though he doesn't know exactly what it is yet, than it is about setting up the mystery of the thing, right? So
Yeah.
it's making us care more about, okay, we have to do something about it, and but it's teasing the mystery in a natural way as opposed to just teasing the mystery with, you know, other just details. Here's another breadcrumb. Here's another breadcrumb. It does have breadcrumbs. I'm not saying it doesn't, but they come out in a more natural sense because the debates tend to be more, at least to a certain point. Obviously, there's absolutely a wall where they have to start talking about what is this thing, what's going on. But it also has the thing where sometimes, like the shaman character Waram, she sometimes, it feels like, just kind of gets a good inkling of what something is and is able to kind of navigate around it to an extent until she learns more. And her making certain assumptions kind of lets the audience go along with her and make certain assumptions, and you learn things through not always just someone explaining something, but sometimes just through how they react to it. And this seems more not normal to her. If anything, she's terrified with things she sees soon, but that lets you get in on like how you feel about certain things as we go through. So it's very good. Anyway, so there's a bad storm in the mountain, and they basically end up going to the monk's place and saying, hey, like, can we like keep this here, this coffin out the rain, we have to store it. And the monk clears out his like storage room so they can put the coffin in, like a little barn area.
And we didn't mention too, the coffin, it's also like bigger than normal, like it's like sticking out of like the car when they're driving, and it's like all wrapped in, it looks like barbed wire or something.
I don't think it is barbed wire because barbed wire didn't exist when the coffin was put in there. But but it looks like
something like that.
It's like thorny wood, I guess. It's like thorns they've wrapped it in. Yeah, the natural barbed wire, the natural man's barbed wire.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they discuss a little bit, and there's just enough stuff here to be like, because I was actually thinking this monk guy was going to turn to be a bad guy. I thought he was lying earlier when he was saying, "Oh, I don't know anything about this stuff." I don't think he actually did know anything about this stuff, other than what he knew about the history of the grave robbing and stuff.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But, they show him, like, give food to everyone else. He's made them all some dinner, and they all eat and smile and laugh. And it's like, hey, we get the sense that they all like each other, particularly the four main characters. I think that's what surprised me after the first half, where it didn't feel like it focused on them quite as much, is that in the second half, it really made me care about them as a unit and how much they care about each other, which I thought was quite impressive. But also kind of this monk character who's going to die very, very soon.
Yeah, I felt a little bad for him because actually I liked him. He I thought he was a good character. And he did a good job of like, providing, some information that we needed. But again, if I was comparing it to other movies, like, I can see the bad version of this where he just does an info dump and like tells you everything.
Oh yeah, he doesn't know a lot. He knows, like, here's some random tools that have been stored here forever that were apparently belonging to some grave diggers or some grave robbers, and there's a photo of like some people, and that's it. Like, that's it. And it doesn't explain everything, but we get more context for it all later through other means. Because I think the auntie, I think she knows some stuff because she agrees to pay them still for everything, even though the rich guy died.
Yeah, I was kind of curious, like, how in the loop the family was, or, if at all, if they had, like, any inkling about some of this stuff. That, like, there was a line that, I think, like, one of the characters says in the beginning, I forget what he said, like, at some point during the first half of the movie, but it seemed like kind of, like, ominous, like, he was like, make sure they don't, like, look too closely or like they don't know much or something like that. I forget exactly what it was, but I mean, I'm assuming they probably don't know that much to the extent of
I think
what's going on.
The anti-character in Korea, she at least seemed to know that the shaman who buried him, but the grandfather that is, was maybe trying to punish him by putting him where he was. Maybe didn't know the full extent of it. Obviously, I think it's clear that this shaman knew what was underneath him. Like, he picked that spot to put him there as a punishment for, because this was a Japanese shaman who clearly worshipped, whatever was underneath.
And I mean, I forget who it is that says it, but they, like, someone says that the shaman was a fox diviner or something like that.
They said his symbol was that of a fox. Yeah, he used fox imagery. Yeah,
Yeah. And then I think I mean I guess it's not like probably not literally. I mean, who knows? I mean, I guess supernatural stuff is happening in the movie, but I think at some point someone is like, "Oh, was he even human, or was he a fox? Like, was he a demon in disguise? Who knows?"
Yeah, possibly. So this is where the big things happen, though, right? This is where the movie hits like, full speed and does its stuff where you're going to remember it now, if you weren't already. And that is during the night. The younger guy character, Bongel, he has a little weird dream where he imagines the monk standing on top of him and like sort of just almost like he's a cat, like kneading on his stomach, right? And all I could think was, even if this is not like a super big guy, he's not overweight or anything, that still has to hurt. He's still a fully grown man standing on top of your stomach.
Yeah.
Like there's no way that doesn't hurt. It wouldn't surprise me to learn if they had like a metal sheet or something to try and like help distribute the weight, or like try so it's not all on his stomach. By the way, he wakes up and it makes him go snooping because he feels something's not quite right. And it's also worth mentioning, when they put the coffin in the storeroom, they got like rice and some other stuff to make a barrier around it, like a magical barrier.
And then I think when he's having the dream, the ghost or corpse or whatever in the dream that's standing on him, I think he's saying something about like his liver. Like he's like he's saying,
it's Matthew Lillard from Scream doing his liver alone. You've got your liver alone. That was a weird cameo.
But yeah, I forget if he was saying like it took my liver, or if he was asking like, can I have your liver? But it was just like one of those like weirdly like unsettling, because it's just like so unnatural. It's like, oh, like why are you talking about your liver? Like someone took your liver. Like that's very weird.
Dear. So he goes snooping and sees something very surprising in the pig pen area of the sort of farm area where the monk lives. And the farmer or the monk has been held up by the throat, seemingly, by someone who's about 9 foot tall, right?
Yeah.
Right. And let me get a good look at it in this scene. I think we just sort of see a vague image of a person that size, and we never see his head. It's not until I think we see him the next time where we get the sense that he's wearing samurai armor, right? But that comes into it in a little bit. But he basically rips the head off this monk, right? Like he sort of twists his head or whatever. The monk drops to his death, and obviously our guy Bongel starts like sneaking back out and like, oh shit, oh god, I need to get the others. And he runs into what's his name, Warum, right? And
Warum. Sorry. I forget if it happens now or later, but he also kills like a farmer or something, and like some pigs.
Yeah, he kills a farmer as well. Yeah. But he tells Warum, and she's like, okay, let's check the coffin, and the seal, the rice circle around it's untouched, but this thing has seemingly went through the roof. There's a hole in the roof as if to bypass the barrier by going up. Like,
come on, that's not fair.
It's like, wait, does this thing fly? It kind of does, actually. It flies now. Right? But so Bongel goes to wake up the other two guys, and she's left alone. And this is where, so the whole movie, my subwoofer didn't do a whole lot, right? It was just, it did a couple of the music stings. You heard the sub sort of go thump, right? This thing starts walking towards the barn, and the subwoofer's going thum, 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 and I'm like, where's this movie going? What is this? And it's like it's like this evil Japanese spirit dressed as a samurai who's coming, because when they looked in the coffin, there was like a samurai's or shogun helmet, right? And this thing's coming back for it, and honestly, so it's not actually the person that died. So just to sort of dip into some of what they explain as the movie goes on, this is an anima, right? And Warum explains that an anima is something where a spirit and an object that are buried together bond and create this over time. So this isn't just this Japanese soldier who was fighting in a war in Korea long before like the grandfather's time. This is obviously way further back because it's Shogun times. But he was buried viciously back then in this land, presumably by the Koreans defending their land. And we get like quick glimpses of this later on in the movie. And he was buried with what they say is an iron, what did they call it? Like something you bury in the ground.
Like a pike or
Yeah, something like that. It was like yeah. But they say well, I think it turns out to be the katana actually, because they stabbed him with the katana and buried him with it. So I think it's not literally like a spike; it's actually the katana they stabbed him with.
Right.
But the idea being that over time, this has created this anima, which is this vengeful, demonic spirit based on the person who died.
Yeah, and I think these are supposed to be like a little more like nastier than like regular ghosts or whatever, because it's not like
because they explain, or after this encounter, which we'll talk about in a second, Werem explains that this thing casted a shadow, and it like it wasn't incorporeal, it wasn't a ghost, it was affecting the world. Ghosts and spirits are actually they're not harmless because they can possess people, but they can't physically attack you, so ultimately human beings will always eventually win. At least that was the hopeful spin she put on it. But an anima can take physical form, and it has. Like, this thing's walking around, it's 9 foot tall. And I can't, like, so when this thing walks up on the other side of the door and we get more glimpses of it and we get a sense of the height, and she starts, like, it starts, like, saying through the door, it's like, are you a human? And she basically lies and says, no, I'm a servant. It's like, oh, good, you're a servant. Have you brought me sweet fish then? You want sweet fish? And she's like, I'll go and prepare them for you. And he basically calls her bluff and like throws the door open and says, no, you're a puny human or whatever. It wasn't the exact line, I'm just paraphrasing. Yeah, but this is when Bong Gil comes running in. After he gets threatening, Bong Gil comes in with like it's not a spear, but he's got something to stab it with, and he tries to like push it back.
Was it the same things? I might be forgetting, but I don't know if it was the same thing that the monk had like showed him earlier, because like he showed like a specific thing that I think they took from the
grave robbers. Yeah, I think it was something that it wasn't quite a crowbar, but it was kind of like a crowbar.
It kind of looked like that.
Yeah. I think he tries to stab him with that, and he gets involved, and this is where you get a full sense of this thing's height, where he's like 9 foot tall. He picks up Bong Gil by the neck and holds him, like his feet are dangling, and this thing looks great. Like this is such a unique design. Well, it's not even that unique in a sense, because it's just a sort of demon with samurai outfit on, or shogun outfit on. But
I know. I mean, we've done Ghost Samurai movies before, like Deadbeat.
That's right. We did the
Christmas
Deadbeat.
classic.
That's right. But I feel like it's such a unique, specific thing that we don't see that often. Especially, it was making me think of there's like a kaiju movie from Japan, a trilogy called, is it Damajin or something to that effect?
I don't think I know it.
But it's like this big sort of like 100-foot tall samurai looking like kaiju that comes out and like torments this village. I can't remember the exact plot. I think there's more to it than that. But there's 3 movies, and I saw them a long time ago. But it was giving me sort of vibes of that, but more horror movie like, because this thing is intimidating. The voice is intimidating. The footsteps, again, having that thump in the bass, every single footstep. They treat this thing like a hulking T-Rex coming towards them.
And again, I like the weird touches. Like, it might sound like a little silly, like when you're describing, like, oh, this, you can kind of try to trick it and it's asking for like sweet fish, but like when you're watching the movie, it is actually very like scary and intimidating.
This was interesting, is that this thing thinks it's a god.
Yeah.
And we don't really know if that's technically true. I mean, she never says it is, and certainly the backstory we get glimpses of implies that it isn't. No, this is something that was born of these two things: the person who's killed and wants vengeance, and the sword or whatever, and probably the Japanese shaman that came later might have had something to do with it as well. That was the part I was a bit fuzzy on, was like, this other Japanese shaman who put the grandfather there, was he part of this? Was he a conduit of this thing underneath? I don't know. That's a bit fuzzy for me.
And I still wasn't really sure if like well, I guess he put the grandfather there as like punishment, but like but part of me was thinking though it also was kind of like, oh, was he also doing that to kind of protect it, because like, yeah, you put, this rich person's grave over there or whatever, and people aren't going to try to dig up, what's underneath it. So like part of me thought that was also like, or I was thinking,
I can see it.
In a way, was that also, kind of a safeguard or something for it?
Yeah, I feel like I'd have to watch it again to get some of this backstory stuff just tighter, because there was a lot to take in. and some of it was coming very, very quickly. But what I did like, actually, this actually comes later in the hospital when we meet Warham's like family. Like she's got like, I think it's like a sister. I don't know if it's like two sisters,
right, yeah.
or a sister and a niece maybe. But they come to help out in the hospital because Bong Gil's injured. We'll get to that in a second. But the reason why I'm bringing this up, because we're talking about the Japanese side of this, is that I really like when they realize this is connected to a Japanese ghost. They turn and say, wait a minute, Japanese ghosts are way more deadly than anything else. Like, what? Like, Japanese ghosts will kill anything in their path. And I almost felt like it was like a meta thing because of all the Japanese ghost movies that were big like 20 years ago. They were making like a little, not a dig, but like a little like, oh, we're going to kind of tie in the fact that there's so many Japanese ghost movies into our mythology, and they're more vicious, and because it made me think of The Grudge. It made me think of like, oh no, if you just even go to that house, like that's you're tied to it, it's going to kill you.
Oh yeah, I mean, you put Ringu up against Casper, and I'm going Ringu any day of the week.
Or Sadako, to be more precise.
Well, yeah.
Right, here's not our name. Just want to clear that up right now. Right. But anyway, so just to go back to this big scene, this thing sticks his hand into Bong Gil's like sort of abdomen, right where the liver is. He basically goes for his liver. Yeah. I don't think he gets it though, and part of the reason why he doesn't get it, despite the fact that he dodges it, and this is something they use this later on, but Bong Gil's got a lot of scripture tattooed on his body as like a protection thing, and it seems like when he went to like stab him with his hand, he avoided the scripture. It's almost like that is actually it's a successful barrier, but he can sort of squeeze in between it. But it's the idea that, this is actually effective. He won't actually go through that. So that's why in the final big set piece of the movie, all the other three characters all paint the scripture on them so that they're a bit more protected.
Oh, right, that's right. And when they're trying to go up into the mountain, the police like just looks at him
like, what the hell's going on with you three? Yeah. But yeah, so he's injured. I actually thought he died here until the next scenes where he's in the hospital. But he's lying there bleeding out. The other two characters come out at this point and they see some of this, and this thing's big, it's scary, and then just to put a capper on how spectacular all this is to look at, and it is
I love this
full-on horror movie. This thing basically sets itself, it just engulfs into flames, like fire just appears around it, and that looks cool even on its own because it's just surrounded by flames, and then it turns into a big fireball and just starts flying around.
It's really cool looking.
It does. It looks surprisingly great. Like I think what really sold it was obviously they lit the setup with big bright orange and red light so that it looked as a fireball going around. So every time you got to a reaction shot of one of the characters looking up at it, it felt big. It felt like, holy shit, what have we accidentally unleashed onto the world? That's the word. Like it really felt apocalyptic. Like this thing might actually just destroy the earth because it's that big and evil and strong and powerful.
Yeah, and it's just it's such like a cool image, like contrasted with this bright fireball in this very like dark nighttime setting. It's really great to look at, but also like there's that hint of like, oh, this is also like very weird and unique. Like I haven't really again can't think of any like horror movies like where this happens. And I like the idea too. Like I think after like they're looking up, they have a shot like from far away. We just kind of see it like from a distance, like I don't know, like somewhere.
The final shot of the scene, the camera just pulls back, and you can just see sort of the glow that's left over in the sort of in between the tree. It almost looks like an oval of light, and like where they're standing.
And I like that idea that it's like everything's been happening has been very like specific to this like group of people, but I like the idea that like I don't know, some random person might have just looked out their window and been like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, it's really, it feels big. It feels like they've unleashed something really big. And admittedly, it ends up just going back to its gravesite after a little bit, so it's not like it was going to go on a complete rampage, but who's to say it wouldn't get back up the next night or in a week or whatever, or if someone else ever stumbles up there, what will happen to them? Like, there's definitely reasons to be concerned, but I think the thing, this is where I got really impressed, because I'm like, you know what, movie, you've officially hooked me into caring about your lore, and that's a big thing if you can do that. If I get to the point where I think your lore is cool because I like this big vengeful Japanese demon thing, like, okay, I'm in. You've sold me, because you've almost treated it like more of a monster movie at this point with the way it's walking around.
I mean, I think that's what's really impressive, is that it's, I guess technically it's like a spirit or whatever, but it's like it goes from being a ghost movie to like a monster movie, and that's really cool.
Yeah, and it is physical, like it is there. Obviously, it can turn into a fireball, but like when they find it in the dirt again later on, it's just lying in there like Dracula. Like, hey, I'm just chilling, like in my dirt. What's so funny, Tim?
I was just something about the way you said there. I just thought it was funny.
So yeah, the next couple of scenes are all at the hospital, and Warum's all upset because her family basically took him in when he realized he was spiritually connected, and she tried to talk him out of being a shaman because it's dangerous, and he said, no, I'll be okay because I'll have you looking at out for me. So she feels guilty that she's let him down, and it sets up kind of that his family abandoned him because he went into this life. And that's when we get introduced to the other characters who come in and do a bit of a chant, and that's where they learn it's a Japanese ghost, and we get all that stuff. Meanwhile, our main dude, Mr. Kim, goes back up to the gravesite to sort of investigate further. And I'm like, what else is he going to find? The last time he came up here, he found a whole second coffin. What's he going to find this time? And he just ends up finding the Japanese demon just kind of in the dirt, like I said. And he's like, shit, it's still up here. We have to do something about it. So the last half hour of the movie, it ultimately ends up being, we have to do this. One, for the potential future of everyone, if this thing keeps doing bad stuff to the country and like souring the land and depurifying everything. But also because, Bong Gil's still lying in the hospital bed, and it seems like the only way to save him might be to like break the hold this thing has on him. Because as we see as they go and encounter it, is that Bong Gil is tied to it, where like later on when they give it some sweet fish to lure it out, Bong Gil in the hospital bed starts chewing as if like he's like acting out what the demon's doing. So I'm calling it a demon for lack of. I mean, I know they give us a word, anima, but I guess I'm just not used to saying that. It's like, oh, the anima did this, the anima did that. Right. But I always like in movies with supernatural elements when the characters, even though I don't think the rules are as amazingly defined here, like when Mr. Kim gets his idea towards the end of how to defeat him, it does kind of feel like, okay, that was established, but it was kind of a throwaway line of dialogue that suddenly turned out to be very, very important. I do like movies like this where the characters have a plan, get into the third act, they've got a goal, and they're doing it for noble reasons. Like, they don't have to go back up to that moon. They're doing it to save someone else. So there's like a sort of there's a very instant, likable, endearing quality to it. Where like, oh no, you're being heroes by doing this. You're not just doing it to save yourself, and that's good. Yeah.
And I really liked what forgive me, I forget the name of the female shaman, but Warum. Yeah, I think like what she does is really cool. Like, again, I like that you can kind of like trick this like demon ghost like spirit thing. So like pretending she's like this tree god or like something into basically like tell like, hey, no, this is my land or whatever. Like, was just like a very interesting like weird thing.
Yeah, I mean, she's like, I think I can distract her for a while you guys go look for the object and like cleanse it with this horse's blood, I think they said they had.
Yeah. I would actually like to watch this again because I do there's a lot going on here, so like I'm a little hazy. Yeah,
there's a lot going on in the last 40 minutes. There's a lot of just things to bring up very quickly.
And also like not really important, but I did think it was funny whenever they saw like people talking about the like monk and stuff that got murdered, and they're like, oh yeah, there was this bear attack that
that's
these people.
That's the public story, is that a vicious bear's killed some people, and it sounds like it's killed a couple of other people that we've not seen, like as if like, oh, there's been a bit of a rampage in the forest, so the authorities are looking for a bear. That's why there's police there when they're driving up with their markings all over their face. But yeah, we get this whole big plan playing out where she actually, this is something we should explain about her actually, about Warum, is that whilst they were staying at the monk's place, so this is before the demon thing got up, she goes out to sleep in the car for whatever reason, and when she's out there,
Right.
So it sets up a whole thing where part of the reason why she's a shaman is because her dead grandmother is like tied to her and is helping her. So there's a moment where it basically does what it did with the other ghost earlier on, where it's in the reflection in the rear view mirror in the car. But it's not intimidating this time. This time it's like, hey, you there, grandmother? And she turns the mirror and like the grandmother's sitting there, and it's like she's asking for guidance. That's important because it comes up later, but between that, she also gets like some little visions after all the stuff goes down of this tree and like stuff, and she basically realizes that she can pretend to be like the god of the mountain by being behind the tree and talking to this thing. So they lure her out with all this sweet fish, which bizarrely the thing I can compare this to weirdly is the 1998 Godzilla, where they put out a bunch of fish to lure out their shitty version of Godzilla. But this thing wakes up, starts chomping on some fish, and comes over to this big, creepy looking tree, and she's behind it, and she's like, why are you here, creature? And starts talking to it, and it just kind of keeps going, and she tries to distract him, and ultimately when it gets to the point where he's kind of like clocked that she's not what she says he is, and he comes around the corner or whatever and confronts her. Like her dead grandmother like shows up to like battle this thing, and we don't see it. She runs away, and we cut away from the scene. And presumably because this thing does show up at the gravesite with the others in a minute, Grandma probably lost. But
yeah,
I will say though, you know what? There's so many crappy ghost movies, and there was one just last year that springing to mind where they'll set up like a dead relative who will like show up to fight the bad ghost at the end and like sort of help save the main characters, and it's almost always super saccharine and super cheesy. Yeah. Credit to this movie for doing a version of it where it was like, no, they just set up that this spirit is actually there to help her as a guide because she's a shaman, and it's here to stall the demon towards the end to help her. It didn't feel like it was overly saccharine. It didn't feel like it was trying to go for like a pulling on the heartstrings. It just felt like they established this, and it's going to hold it off for a bit while she goes and gets the other two who cannot find the object that they're looking for to cleanse. But they end up just pouring the pig's blood on it because it goes after Kim. It picks up Kim, and goes through like his liver and says, are you going to be my servant, or are you just going to feed me a liver? And the others try and help, but they end up throwing the pig's or the horse's blood onto him, and it kind of burns him like it's holy water. And they have this whole realization here, and I was a little bit mixed or fuzzy on exactly the realization here, but the big thing though is that while the demon or the anima grabs the other two characters, grabs Ko and it grabs Warum and picks them both up right by the neck, Kim gets up and he basically realizes that the opposite of fire is water, right? That makes some sense. And the opposite of metal is wood. So he comes to the conclusion that wet wood will be this thing's weakness. So he uses his own blood to wet this, wooden whatever. I think it's the handle of the pickaxe that he was using to dig the hole.
Sounds right. Yeah.
But he starts whacking this thing at the demon, and it actually goes through him, and he sort of splits like he's the T-1000 kind of down the middle, and he just keeps whacking at him, and then ultimately wins. And I'm sure I'm glossing over some details here. Like I say, there was a lot of information. There was a whole little bit where you see some quick flashbacks, and he narrates a couple of things as he's realizing something. I can't say that I got all of that, but the final point of it I got. But there was definitely some stuff in there that I'll get on a rewatch that was a lot to take in this first viewing.
Yeah, and it's not like you're saying that like in a negative way. Like it's not like, oh, it was so hard to follow, I didn't know what's going on. It's like, oh no, like you get the gist of it. It's just that they're throwing a lot.
Honestly,
at you.
I feel like anything I'm fuzzy on is get more to do with how quick the subtitles were, because it was a lot of Korean very quickly, as opposed to it was poorly scripted. I'm sure if you spoke Korean, this was probably easier to take in. This is just one of the few pitfalls of watching something foreign with subtitles.
Right. Yeah. And I know, like, for me it was just, unfortunately with my time constraints, having to watch it a little late. Like if we weren't doing it for the show, I might have like stopped it a little earlier and watched it when I was a bit more awake the next day. But Again, that's not a fault of the movie at all. It's just the time I was watching it.
Yeah, but I was thinking at this moment though, okay, it makes sense he's the one that's killed it. He's the one that brought them up here, but it also makes sense that he's the one that's actually going to die, right? And also this whole time, in the hospital bed, Bong Gil was reacting and coughing up blood and whatever. Although at the end here, when this thing's been killed, the blood that he's coughed up is black, and that lets the other two ladies who have been like praying next to him realize that, I think he's back to normal, and he is, like, he's been saved by these actions. But I thought, no, it makes sense that the old guy is the one that's going to die. Like, because going back to that conversation about protecting the country for the younger generation, it makes sense that he would literally save the younger generation and, sacrifice himself doing so. And I think I really liked how it swerved us, because, they rush him to the hospital, they're working on him, and it's not really working, he's lying there. And you basically hear his narration, like his dying narration, as he's saying, hey, I did this, I'm old, I'm ready to go, but I did something good before I died. There's nothing else that I need to live for. And just as he's fading, he goes, oh, my daughter's wedding. And then it cuts to, like, time later, and it's Warren narrating, saying, hey, we all went back to our lives, and everyone kind of acted like nothing was wrong. She's back doing regular shaman stuff with Bong Gil. The funeral director Ko's doing his job, and they're all just doing normal stuff. However, our main man Kim is alive because he has to go to his daughter's wedding. So it's like he found something to live for in that last second, so he couldn't just let himself die. So we actually get like a really nice, happy ending where, and this is what I was getting at earlier with the music in the last couple of minutes being really upbeat and like positive, because it's like, hey, we all survived, we did it, we saved everyone, and we're all closer now. And it ends with this kind of heartwarming moment at the wedding of his daughter where he insists that the other three main characters come in for the family photo even though they're not family. And I'm sure his daughter's like, who are these strangers, Dad? Why are they in my wedding photos? But it's a nice moment. It does the jump scare cut to title as the camera takes the photo. Smash cut to Exhuma. But honestly, like, I was so into the mythology and like how big it felt when they actually introduced this enemy, that at the end of the movie I was just you know what, you made me care about all these characters in the second half of the film, because they were all fighting so hard to save each other, and it made it very endearing. So at the end, when it's like, hey, we should all be in the photo, even though some of them don't feel comfortable being in the photo, they get forced into it anyway, it felt kind of nice. It was like, hey, they deserve to win, and here we are.
Yeah, again, like, I can see other movies where, it might feel like a little cheap or too cheesy or whatever, but here, you genuinely have been through a lot with these characters, and, at least for us, we liked them quite a bit, so it was nice to actually, get a little bit of a happy ending.
Yeah, I feel like, we haven't talked about Ko that much, but it is worth mentioning that Ko, the funeral director, has a lot of good back and forth with Kim. Like, they have a lot of, like, he's usually his sparring partner when it comes to the conversations, and they're the way they talk and joke with each other is quite nice. Like, there's a lot of that. It just didn't come up a lot as you're describing the events and the plot as much, Yeah,
he, like, in terms of like what other happens to the other characters and stuff, he's maybe like a bit more boring, but he's not a bad character. Like, he's a good not like foil, but I guess like partner for Mr. Kim. Like, they work well together.
Yeah, I guess he's more the straight man if anything else.
Yeah.
So yeah, I pleasantly, not that I was expecting it to be bad by any means, but I'd still say it was a pleasant surprise with how much I liked it.
No, I agree. Like, I'd heard good things, but then I feel like we have heard good things about other movies.
Yeah, we heard good things about stop motion, Tim.
Right.
We heard good things about, I don't know. Baghead. You said you heard good things about that. That was a crock of shit.
So again, like I said, I love Shudder, but I can never fully trust it. But yeah, this is one of those times where it's like not even like living up to the hype, but like exceeding it. Like, I was sitting down for like, oh yeah, this will probably be like a pretty good solid thing, hopefully, and instead I was like, wow, this really blew me away. I was I
was into the direction at the start, but I was kind of thinking for the first half hour, this is probably going to be a very generic Spirit movie or something. I wasn't expecting anything special. And then obviously it took these weird swings where it kind of wrapped that story up like halfway through, and I went, okay, what now? This is weird pacing. But when it got to the meat of that second half, and it got to the Amina walking around and how they presented that villain, if you want to call him that, it was just so entertaining. And I was like, I can't believe this movie's doing this. This is kind of awesome. You know. I was very, very pleased. Like, I you can critique it a little bit and say that, yeah, the pacing's a little bit weird because of the structure, and you could maybe say, yeah, a couple of the details are maybe a bit quick and fuzzy. But again, I don't know how much of that is just because it's translated here as opposed to, you know, speaking the language natively. But regardless, they're fairly minor quibbles, all things considered.
Yeah, and like I'm sure maybe I would have picked up on a few things if I knew more about, like, you know, Japanese Korean, like, you know, history, like, but obviously it's not like you need to, you know. It
would be nice probably to know which war this demon, well, the character that the demon came from, like what war he was in historically with Korea, just for context, because I'm sure there was one, but I mean, I don't know them.
Because I think they've had, I don't know if like that have like a long history of like conflicts with each other, or if it was like just like one specific war or something, or I don't know if like did maybe Japan like invade them during World War II or something. Again, I'm sorry, I'm not a history major, but
okay, a quick Google has led me to a Wikipedia article titled "The Japanese Invasions of Korea 1592 to 1598." That sounds like it might be the right time period.
Yeah, so it's like a long history of that.
I mean, to be fair, it doesn't sound like they've had a more recent, like, you know, straight up war, so that's good, I guess. That was a while ago, but it's interesting. I think that's the thing, is even when some of the details were maybe not quite as clear to me, the overall vibe of what it was presenting me was always so interesting that it didn't bother me too much. And it's the sort of thing where I think on rewatches I'll pick up a little bit more. I'll realize like what they were referring to, because there was a couple of times in the hospital, like after the big scene, where it was like, wait, are they talking about a separate Japanese thing, or is this the same thing they just saw? Are they talking about a separate spirit that's different to the big scary shogun that we just saw? And I think they were talking about the same thing, but there was a couple of times where I wasn't sure if there was maybe two elements to it, as opposed to just the one thing. But
and I mean, again, I feel like I haven't said this about a movie in a long time, but like this is something that I'm excited to watch again. Like, you know,
you're excited to purchase it and own it for yourself.
Hey, if they put a nice steelbook out, I'm all over it.
I mean, I don't know if it's a physical release. I did check iTunes. It is, it's on US iTunes to purchase from Well Go USA. Not in 4K, sadly, but hey, it's there.
Damn. Did you see The Boys getting a 4K?
I did, yes. Joe, I misheard you for a second. I thought you said The Boys, and I went, oh, that's nice. That's a good show. And I was like, no, you mean The Boy is getting a 4K, and that's much worse.
I've been trying to catch up with TV. I've been ignoring TV for a bit, but I've been watching the latest season of The Boys, and it's been pretty good. I've been enjoying it.
Yeah, I think it's probably the weakest season, but only because they're clearly just setting up a bunch of stuff for the final season. So it doesn't stand on its own as much as like seasons 2 and 3 did. But you know, it's got a lot of good stuff in it. Like, I watched the penultimate episode of the season today, and it had a lot of good things in it.
I'm on the episode before that, I think.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think we're at that point. Not to go too far off topic, but it's time to rate Exhuma. Tim.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go. I mean, obviously, it's gonna be fairly high.
Yeah, I think you're a bit more of a rating slut than I am, though, so you're probably gonna go higher.
Well, I mean, that's why I'm waffling between like an 8.5 and a 9. And you know, obviously the 9s are, you know, that's pretty sacred territory. Not a lot of films, you know, reach that level.
You didn't even rate The Boy a 9 out of 10.
Maybe I should go back. Maybe on a rewatch, I'll see if if it gets up there.
Your rating's already far too high, Tim. Don't even dare.
I think I am gonna go an 8.5 for now. I mean, it's very solid. Again, I was very, it felt good to watch something, not just because I have to watch it or because I'm killing time, but because I was like, well, I mean, technically we did have to watch it for the show, but but like to watch something and then just feel like so invested and like get so drawn into it, for so many different reasons. Just the direction, the cinematography, the characters, the lore, like everything was just really hitting on all cylinders. Like, there's probably like minor quibbles you can make here and there, but it's really not much that matters when it comes down to just watching the movie and just being so into it and wanting to see where it goes. And then when it, when it's doing the horror stuff, the horror stuff is hitting, it visually, it looks cool, it's creepy, it's effective, it's doing a lot of unique things that I haven't seen in horror movies before. It just has a really interesting story and characters. So I just really can't say enough good things. And again, in last year and this year, it's not like we haven't seen good things, but it's definitely been a little less than it feels like maybe previously. So I was just really happy to see something this big. So I'll give it an 8.5, but I don't know, like if I do rewatch it, like I could see it maybe even bumping up a little bit, if I rewatch it again and I'm still feeling these highs, and maybe pick up on something that I might have missed before or something. But I'll just stick with the 8.5 for now.
Yeah, I think I'm going with a straight 8. I was kind of waffling between an 8 and an 8.5 myself, and I think I'm going to go with an 8 for now. I think it's the sort of thing that on rewatches it could go up. I think it feels like the sort of premise that's probably been done before to some extent, and by done before I just mean like a Japanese samurai demon or spirit tormenting people. But I can see previous attempts being quite hokey, where this is like this feels like an attempt to do that premise, but take it seriously and present it as like a scary threat that actually is very intimidating, and it terrifies the characters, and they have to like take care of it because they feel that they need to save the world, kind of thing. Like I really enjoyed how that stuff was presented and like how big and imposing it felt. So 8 out of 10 for me. Great movie. Probably the best new release we've done in quite some time.
I mean, this is like, I mean, we still got half of the year to go.
Of course, there's a lot of heavy hitters we've started to do for this year.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not saying that this will be, my favorite of the year by the end of it, but I think as of right now, this is, easily a top runner.
Yeah. You can't make statements like that at the end of every time we do a good movie, though, Tim, because you're going to give people all the puzzle pieces to put together your top 10 before we get to it. So,
I mean, they can literally just look at the scores and have a pretty good idea. But
shut up! Don't be ruining the magic. But yeah, that's Exhuma. That is our thoughts on the recent release. For some reason, you've spoiled it all for yourself by listening to all of this. Go watch it. Just go do that. But yeah, obviously I should tell you what's coming next week on the show. And next week should be us going to an older movie again, because we're basically, because we'll be getting a little ahead in recording. We know that something's about to be available to record, but it won't be available till the time after the next recording. So for 1 week, we're dipping out on new releases and going back to one of the franchises we're working on. So we'll be doing the 5th Hammer Dracula movie, which is Taste the Blood of Dracula from 1970. That is what's going to be on next episode. So look forward to that. And as I did say at the start of the show, you can get an exclusive episode on Patreon every month from me and Tim. So we've been doing like summery themed goofy 80s and 90s slasher movies for summer. So we got one more of those later this month in August. But yeah, we did Nightmare Beach, we did Death Spa, but we do a lot of movies of that ilk. Although sometimes we do some interesting, like not goofy style movies. The one that sticks out is late last year we did a Japanese film called Door, which was a very interesting,
Oh right, yeah.
unique movie. Do you remember Door, Tim? There's a couple of sequels.
The door-to-door salesman.
I mean, technically, yes, there was a door-to-door salesman in it. I wouldn't say that's what the plot revolved around, though. But yes, there is indeed some sequels that we may get to at some point. I don't think 2 and 3 are as easy to access, though, from a quick glance that I had.
I'll hit my guy up, see if what I can do.
Okay, very good. But you can get that. We also do even more stream segments. We get 1 or 2 of those every month where we'll do like a random top 5 or do a little sort of discussion topic or something like that. Sometimes Tim will make me play a silly game that he's concocted, but you can get those there too. But yeah, all of that does help support the show and all the shows that I do here on Mail Fuzz Movies. So if you want the content to keep coming, then go over to Patreon and help it all happen. But that is us. So thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.